Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. I just want to remind you that all information on this show is meant for educational purposes only, and always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being. And I hope you are mentally healthy and being well. Thanks for joining me, and I'm going to go right into an email that I received, and it has a bunch of talking points in it. So I'm going to address them as I read this email, and I think if you listen to this show for the reasons I think you listen to this show, you're going to relate to quite a few of these, if not just a few or all of them. I hope that you get some value from what we're talking about today. It has to do with a woman that breaks up and then gets back together with her boyfriend, and then breaks up again and then gets back together. And her boyfriend, she believes, must be narcissist or emotionally abusive or something, and she's not sure what to do. She's afraid, and she's not sure what to believe, because this is what happens when you get into any type of relationship where it seems that no matter how hard you try to work on the relationship, it never works, or it never reaches the level of happiness or satisfaction. In fact, it sometimes goes the opposite way. You break up and you realize, oh, I love that person. And then you want to get back together thinking, well, they're being nice now. They're being kind to me. And they seem to be remorseful, if you had a fight or something. And then you get back together and suddenly the patterns, well, not suddenly, it takes a little while, but the patterns pick up again. And you're thinking, oh, here we go again. And so this vicious cycle of breaking up and getting back together and breaking up, I'm going to tell you right now, it has to stop. It really does. It has to stop. When you break up with somebody and then get back together and then break up again and then get back together, there's something that's not being addressed. I mean, this is the important stuff. And what's not being addressed doesn't end up on the unacceptable list. And you need to be really, really clear about what is on your acceptable and unacceptable list. Because when you break up over something that might be unacceptable and you take them back and they do that same behavior, and maybe you break up again or maybe not, then it's not really unacceptable. You're not making it unacceptable. You're making it a suggestion. So this is where you need to tighten the belt and tell yourself, this is what I will accept, and this is what I won't accept. Tell yourself that and get clear on what those things are. Then, when you're with somebody and they leave or you break up and then you get back together and the breakup was because of something that was unacceptable, you can remind yourself, oh yeah, this is unacceptable. And then you follow your rule. What is your rule? When the unacceptable is violated, what is your rule? That's accountability. What is your rule? You have to make rules. It doesn't mean you even have to tell the other person what your rules are. You can tell the other person what's unacceptable. Hey, if you ever say that to me again, that's it. That'll be it for me. And that could mean a number of things. I never want you to say that to me again, or I never want you to do that again. That is unacceptable to me. Great. That's what you put out there, and it doesn't matter what the accountability is to them. It matters to you. It could matter to them if you say, if you ever do that again, I'll leave. But if you've already left once, or if they've already left you once, and you're back together, then they know that that's not really an accountable action. They know that even if you leave, even if you break up, that you're just going to get back together again. So it must be a relaxed rule. It must only be a suggestion. And you'll be hurt for a while, but there's a way to get you to be happy again and feel loved again and feel important again. So they know that's going to happen. So if you're in this kind of in and out relationship where you break up, get back together, break up, get back together, it's time to write that list of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. When you have the list and then you apply the rules, the accountability, then when it happens again, you follow the rules. You follow through. Because if you don't follow through, they will get broken time and time again. And then the vicious cycle continues. And if you're not following your own rules, then you're basically invalidating yourself. If you think you are getting some sort of bad behavior from someone else, but you're doing it to yourself, that's even worse because now you can't even trust yourself. And I know there are people listening right now that get into that space where they know they can't trust themselves. Maybe not because of that, but because of all the crazy making that can go on in a relationship. They aren't sure if their decisions are the right decisions because they thought they knew what was true, but the other person convinced them that it wasn't necessarily true, or it wasn't the right perspective that you had. They were convincing to you, so you decided not to trust yourself. I tell you what, when you create the criteria, what's unacceptable and what's not, those are your boundaries, and you apply the rules and you follow through, you end up becoming the most trustworthy person in your life because you know you can count on you. And you always have to start with that foundation, no matter what type of relationship you're in, or even if you're not in a relationship. You always have to have that foundation. You always have to get to the point where you know you can trust you. And in my mind, that means I have a set of rules. If they're violated, I follow through with the accountability for those rules. If I don't follow through, how can I trust myself? As soon as I follow through, I feel more confident in myself. I may be scared. I may not want to provide accountability. I may not want to make it known how upset I am or get into an argument, or I may not want to do any of this stuff because it might mean losing the other person in my life. It might mean losing someone that has meaning in my life. And if I'm dealing with any fears, like fear of abandonment, fear of not being loved, all these fears that might come from low self-worth, low self-esteem, if I'm dealing with any of that stuff, then I may not want to apply the rules. I may not want to follow through with my promise to myself. But if I don't follow through, then I end up hurting myself. I end up causing my own suffering. So there's something to be aware of as we move into this episode and I read this email, and I'll probably mention some of this stuff again, but I wanted to mention that in case you are in a situation where it's in and out. Even when you have a relationship and you're not breaking up, there could be moments where it feels like you're alone. I'm alone in this relationship for the next 2 or 3 weeks because, they're mad at me and they won't talk to me. And in this email, she talks about him giving her the silent treatment. That and more can happen to make you feel like you're not in a relationship. Just generally being unhappy in the relationship while the other person isn't affected. When you're both affected and you're both unhappy and you both can't figure out what's wrong, there's a good chance that you can actually talk about this stuff and get through it. But when one of you is unhappy, if you're unhappy and you want to work on things and sort things out and they don't, that makes it a lot tougher. And that's when you're not really working together as a team anymore. It's not a relationship anymore. It's just you trying to fix something or satisfy someone or make things better without any help. And you need help. You need help in a relationship, whether it's romantic, platonic, or family, even work relationships. You need help from the other person to move the relationship into a better space. So whatever relationship you have that's going on that might be difficult for you, without the other person's cooperation, it's almost impossible to do on your own. Because otherwise you might be forcing someone to take responsibility for their role in the relationship when they believe they have no responsibility. They might believe it's all you, it's all your fault, and you need to fix it. But you can't do it alone. It just doesn't work that way. You're not capable of doing it alone because it takes 2 people to build a relationship. I know I've said that before, but I just want to reiterate that here because if the other person isn't aware that they are 50% of the foundation, then you can't get very far. And this is why some people struggle in their relationship thinking that I'm doing the best I can. Well, they may not be. They may not be doing much of anything. So doing the best you can isn't enough. And that sounds disheartening. That sounds defeating. But if you know it's not enough, at least you won't try pushing that giant stone uphill like Sisyphus, where he pushes it up, and then right before he gets to the top, it rolls back down. And then he has to go all the way back down to the bottom and push it up again. It's that futile Sisyphean effort that takes you nowhere and wears you out, tires you out, and then you're just stuck at the bottom all the time. And that big boulder never seems to get lighter. It only gets heavier. And you shouldn't put yourself through that. If you both go through it, that's an entirely different story. If you are willing to do it and they are willing to do it and push that stone together, then there's a chance. But there has to be willing participants, and there has to be both of you willing to take responsibility for your role in the relationship, even if one person thinks that they're doing nothing wrong, which is often what happens. That's normal. The other person thinks, I'm doing nothing wrong. It's all them. But even when you have that belief, or they have that belief, there still has to be some give. There still has to be that one little inkling of, okay, you know what? I think I'm doing everything right, but I'm willing to step out of that belief so that we can work on this relationship. I can be open-minded about it because I want to work on this because the bigger picture is us. And I care about us. And maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something I don't see. When you can get that attitude from someone else, when you can get those words, maybe there's something I don't see. If you can get those words or something like it, then again, there's a chance. So let me read through this email. I'm going to stop every now and then and comment on what this person's saying or asking, and we'll see if there's a chance for her. She writes, I'm currently getting the silent treatment, and it's making my brain run wild. Everything you've said in your podcast has related to my ex-partner. We've been in a vicious cycle which for years has made me feel unsure, confused, doubtful, and emotional. Like you said in one episode, narcissists don't show empathy, and this is something I'm trying to work out because my partner would sometimes show it and then would say things like, I sometimes can't feel sympathetic toward you because your life is so easy and you haven't been through anything compared to me or others, so when you have little problems, I find it hard to empathize. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. There's more to this email, like I said, but I want to comment on a couple of things already. Your first paragraph says, we've been in a vicious cycle which for years has made me feel unsure, confused, doubtful, and emotional. Now, those are always red flags, or at least orange flags, in a relationship. If you feel unsure, confused, doubtful, and emotional, when you feel like that, especially if you've been feeling like that for years, it doesn't go away. Now, with this relationship, it doesn't go away. So let me clarify that. It will go away once you're away from the person that has this effect on you. So let me repeat that. What you're feeling, the unsure, confused, doubtful, and emotional state that you're in, it doesn't go away until that person is no longer an influence in your life. That person is influencing you to feel that way. I'm not saying they're doing it to you. I'm not saying that they have some magical power over you. You are creating this inside of you because you continue to have an attachment for this person. And as long as you have an attachment and you feel drawn to be with them, you will always feel unsure, confused, doubtful, and emotional. Now, that may not sound like a fair statement to say, because you might tell me, well, he went to therapy and he's better now and I don't feel that way anymore. And if that's the case, great. I will be the first to say I'm glad I'm wrong. But in my experience, until that happens, you will never feel any different as long as you're around this person, because there's something in the way you two communicate or the way he shows up that is causing you to feel this way. And there is something that you are doing that keeps you getting back into this space. If you're getting back together and you have trust issues and you have fears and all this stuff is coming up because this person is in your life, then that doesn't go away. Now, it could go away after you've done some healing if that person leaves or you leave him. But I want to tell you that this doesn't go away until something drastic changes. And that could mean you're separated for a while and you get a chance to heal. Or it could mean that, yes, you go to therapy, he goes to therapy, you both go to therapy or whatever. And you learn something about yourself and he learns something about himself and you're both willing to work on stuff. Yes, it can change. But your belief that it won't change is going to help you so much more. And that's why I'm saying it with such confidence that this will never change, because if you don't believe that, you will continue doing the same things, repeating the same cycle. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to heal. How do you heal? Sometimes you have to take a break. You have to take a break from what the pattern is today. The pattern may be the same over and over and over again. So look at that pattern. What has happened up till now that has kept you this way, and change that pattern. And changing that pattern might be a number of things, like I already said, therapy or separating, or even just having an agreement of how you both will be showing up in the relationship. But that involves both of you working on it. And typically when you're dealing with someone, if he's narcissistic or emotionally abusive, he's not going to think anything's wrong with him. Or he'll say, you need to work on yourself. You're the one with the problems. And when you hear that, you already know that you're alone, that you're going to have to push that boulder up by yourself. And that doesn't work. So I'm going to continue on here. You said something else in your second paragraph. You said something important that he said. He said, I sometimes can't feel sympathetic towards you because your life is so easy and you haven't been through anything compared to me or others. So when you have little problems, I find it hard to empathize. I hope everyone listening right now understands what was just said there. I'm going to tell you how I interpret this. I interpret this like this. Your pain and suffering is not important, but mine is. This isn't about you. This is about me. Whatever pain you experience isn't important enough to talk about or even address, because you're not focused on me and my pain and what you're doing to me. That's what I read. And I think it's true. Because if he has these narcissistic tendencies, or if he's narcissistic, then what you have here is someone that turns it around and makes it about him. And I want you to listen for comments like this. And anyone listening who is in a difficult relationship right now, listen for comments where they turn it around and make it about them. And then keep your head on. Keep your head about you, because what needs to happen inside of you is you need to be aware of what they're saying. If they say something like this, sometimes I can't feel sympathetic towards you because your life is so easy and you haven't been through anything compared to me. You need to hear the invalidation in that comment. That's invalidation. That is minimizing. That is making you unimportant and then making themselves the victim, because that's what he's doing here. So to the person who wrote this is what he's doing. He's making himself the victim, turning it around back to him so that you focus on him. And if you're busy focusing on him and what you fail to recognize about him, about you, then you're going to be focused on your own shortcomings. These aren't really your shortcomings, but he's going to make them your shortcomings. He's going to make sure that you question what you're supposed to be focused on. So I wanted to break that apart. I'm going to continue reading here. I'm trying to figure out if he will forever have this trait and never change, or if he's just so lost that these traits come out and then leave. Well, let me just address that. There's a few more paragraphs here, but again, my belief is they never change, assuming the pattern hasn't changed. So look at the pattern. Has it been this way for just the last few months? Or has it always been this way the last few years? Has it been up and down, up and down? When there's an up curve, there's a down curve. When there's an up curve, there's a down curve. If it's like that, then it's never going to change. So the answer to your question, I can say pretty confidently, is that this will never change. And he may be lost. Like you said, is he just lost that these traits come out and then leave? He could be lost, but he will always be this way until something changes. So nothing has changed in the past, so don't expect it to. I know that takes out hope. That takes out any wishful thinking about a fantastic future together. But the way things are now, unless something drastic changes, will continue to be the way things are now. Just kind of burn that into your head, not to be depressing, but just to make sure that it is knowledge for your brain to process. You don't want to give it fantasy. You don't want to give it some unknown future that you hope will happen. You want to give it data. You want to give it knowledge. You want to give it what has happened. So let me continue here. She writes, I feel so confused and I trust anything that anyone says to me so easily. I believe because I know I'm honest and genuine, so I assume that everyone else says the truth. All right, let me address that. So what you have here is someone who lives their life honestly, with integrity, probably with, and I'm going to guess, kindness and compassion and empathy and sympathy and generosity and supporting other people. Probably all wonderful, amazing traits that most people would want. The healthy, kind people and the not so healthy, maybe unkind people. We all want these qualities. The good, healthy, kind people want it because they don't want to deal with the drama in their life. They want to have somebody that actually is supportive and kind and caring, and it makes sense, and that makes the relationship bigger and better and stronger. But the unhealthy people like that too because they like to exploit it. They may not know they're exploiting it, some people, but some people do. But the innocence and naivete is appealing to a manipulative person. So if you are naive and someone is manipulative, you are a prime target, unfortunately. And I've seen this quite a lot with honest people especially. The more honest you are and the less you think like a dishonest person, the less you're going to be able to detect dishonesty. And that's a problem. I get it. That's a real problem. Fortunately for me, I wasn't always an honest person. I mean, that doesn't sound very fortunate, but having been on that side where lying was easier than telling the truth, and then healing from that, realizing why I lie and getting out of that stage of my life and being in the space I'm in now, I'd like to think I'm of more integrity and more honest. I now have a certain sense about certain people, not always, sometimes I'm duped, but a certain sense about when people lie because of the stories they give and their body language. And I look at them and I think, oh, that's me 20 years ago. I see me. I see myself doing that 20 years ago. Therefore, I see you doing that now. And they're pretty easy to spot, but not always, because some of them are very clever. And like I said, any one of us can get duped by these people. So just because you're kind and caring and generous and supportive and sympathetic doesn't mean you're the only target. We're all a target. It's just that some of us are easier targets, unfortunately. Now, that doesn't sound very uplifting. I get it. So she says, I feel confused. I trust anything that anyone says to me so easily. I believe because I know I'm honest and genuine, so I assume that everyone else says the truth. I need you to get on board with the idea that not everyone says the truth. That's hard to accept, but if you start being just a tad skeptical, you'll find that you won't get suckered into certain situations. And I want to be very careful how I walk the line here, but I want you to be just a bit skeptical. Just a bit skeptical, because when you do, you're able to start to distinguish between truthful people and not truthful people. And how you do that doesn't mean you grill them and give them 20 questions. It might, but one of the ways you can do this is to ask yourself, how do I know that's true? I mean, it's a great question. How do I really know that's true? So no matter what someone says, hey, it's not raining out, ask yourself the question, how do I know that's true? That may be a silly question because you may look out the window and the sun is shining and you automatically know it's true. But I want you to start putting that question in your head. How do I know it's true? That way, when somebody says something like, I was late because it was traffic, then you can ask yourself, well, how do I know that's true? Because what happens when you say that? Well, I don't know it's true. So what's the next thing you have to do? Well, I don't know. Do I have to look at traffic patterns on Google Maps or something? Maybe. I'm not saying you have to be suspicious of everything that everyone says, and you don't even have to go that far. I'm just saying that Put those words in your head so that you can start interrupting your pattern of naivete. And what I mean by that is naivete is very innocent. It's a very appealing trait in most people to be naive, because that means you don't put expectations on people. You don't expect the worst from them. You just expect people to be like you are. And so you might walk around with this naiveness, and because you have this naiveness, you have to be a little bit more diligent in how you process information. So instead of just letting all that information fly in, knowing that everything's true, you have to stop yourself. You have to interrupt your own pattern and ask yourself, how do I know this is true? And that will help you start confirming, affirming, researching, whatever you need to do to build a trust in yourself and also in them. So yes, that might mean that innocent people, perfectly normal, innocent people that are in your life that say something that sounds perfectly normal and innocent, and probably is, might be under your skeptical eye. That doesn't mean you have to say you're skeptical to them. That doesn't mean you have to say, I don't trust you. It's just a matter of self-filtering, self-processing, so that you develop this technique so that you don't get suckered as easily. And it's a difficult process. I get it. It's difficult because some people show up as so honest, so kind, and so nice, but then they have this behavior that comes out and you're like, where did this come from? So let me move on here. She goes on to say, I guess I'm just really confused and I don't know if he will ever change because he said the things that you told us about. He said, I'll speak to someone, I promise, or I'll deal with this when I'm back from our holiday, or I'll work on myself soon. All right, things like that, they're all delay tactics. And again, I was there. That was me saying those things. I could have mouthed those words just as he did. I promise I'll work on myself. Yes, I'm working on it. Yes, I do need help. I would say these things. When I was married, those are the things I said too. And they were all delay tactics because I didn't really believe I had a problem. I just believed she had the problem and that she needed to fix herself. And then once she did, I wouldn't have to work on this stuff because then I could just say, oh, good, she fixed herself. Now I don't have to go forward with all these false promises that I made. And so those were all delay tactics for me. That is how I stayed in the relationship for so long without it ending because I knew those delay tactics work. Now I see through them. When somebody writes to me and says, he promises or she promises that they're going to go to therapy, I say in my mind, no, that's not going to happen because it doesn't happen until it happens. So it's not true until it is. Because I start every thought, or at least a lot of thoughts, with the question, how do I know that to be true? I don't. It's not. And especially when I look at the pattern that this person said it before, they didn't do it, or they went once and then quit going, it means that they're just delaying, hoping that the other person will eventually change so that they don't have to do anything. So I've seen that over and over again. It is not a healthy pattern. It's a delay tactic, at least what I call it. So that's what I say about that. You said you're really confused and you don't know if he'll ever change because he said all those things. Again, you just have to believe he won't. You have to put that in your mind. In fact, you've heard me say this on my show before. And if you haven't, this is an important question. If you knew for a fact the other person would never, ever change, what would you do then? That's an important question. If the person in your life, whether romantic, family, friend, coworker, if you knew they would never change, ever, what would you do then? What would you think then? How would you feel then? Because that's what you should be doing, thinking, and feeling. That is the truth. That is what's happening now. They aren't their potential, as my girlfriend says. She says, nobody is their potential. Actions are the only words that speak. They're not only louder than words, they're the only words that you want to see. They're not words, but you need to see change. You can't hear about change. You need to see the change in order to know there's change. And until that happens, it's not true. And she followed that up with, I never knew if what he was saying was to buy more time or if he was just so overwhelmed with his whole life. Again, they're all delay tactics. So I sort of already answered that. And he could also be overwhelmed with his whole life. Yes, he could be. And, this is one of those yes and kind of things. Yes, it's a delay tactic, and he could be overwhelmed. Yes, he could be lying, and he could have had a terrible childhood, but he's still lying. Yes, he could be hurting you and doesn't care about you, and he's the victim of all this bad stuff, so you should feel sorry for him. So yes, and those all could be true. But even if those were true, then he needs to work on himself while you work on yourself, because obviously if it's always about him, if all the focus needs to go back to him, then until he is able to do those things, you need to work on yourself. You need to focus on yourself and stop focusing on this person that continues to delay what they need to do for themselves, regardless if they stay in this relationship with you. They need to do this for themselves. They need to go work on themselves. If they truly are the victim they claim to be, they need to work on that. And call me when you're done. And that was a little cold. I know it's a little cold. But somebody said that to me once, about 10 years ago. Call me when you're done. Call me when you're getting the help you need. Those are powerful, powerful words, because that relationship was about to end. And when she said that to me, that was the best kick in the butt I needed. You know what? You need to work on yourself. Go do that. I'm going to take care of myself. You go take care of yourself. I hated it and I loved it at the same time, because that's part of what started the healing process for me. A number of things started it, but that was a big one. When she told me, look, I'm going to go focus on myself. You need to go focus on yourself. She didn't say those words exactly, but the sentiment was there. And definitely it was pretty close to call me when you're ready. Call me when you're better. Call me when you've worked on yourself. Now you have to be careful here, because some people will say, I'm going to go work on myself, and then call you saying they're better. And then you'll get back together with them or whatever. And for the first few weeks, everything's great. And then they're back to their old pattern. But this, I'm telling you to go back to the beginning of the episode where I talk about the rules and accountability. And if they break that pattern again, that's who they're going to be. Strike one, you learn something, you create the rules, you say that's unacceptable, that's not, and here's what's going to happen if that's violated. And then strike two, they do it again, you provide accountability, and if for some reason you want to go to that 3 strikes and you're out, you can sure do it again, but make sure it doesn't go beyond that. I really believe in 3 strikes, you're out. 2 strikes is bad enough. 3 strikes, no more. Don't expose yourself to that. All right, I'm almost done with this. Let me read the rest. Before this relationship, I worked on myself and my insecurities, my biggest one being jealousy. I'd never stop anyone from doing something, but I would overthink and cause these scenarios in my head and get so worked up. I worked on this and I was ready for my next relationship, and I felt great, but then my partner was cheated on previously and had many insecurities, and I was there to support him, but he would constantly check my phone while asleep to see who I was messaging, etc. But I was never allowed to see his phone because, quote, there's nothing to see. Okay, so this is a problem. And I'm going to tell you from the perspective I just gave you about the person I used to be. So I used to be the person that could lie easily, that could manipulate easily. I sound like a real jerk when I say it that way. And I was a nice guy in a lot of respects, but I was emotionally abusive. I was judgmental. I was hurtful to the people I was with. So I want to be transparent about this, because I can look at someone who's doing the behaviors I used to do, like I said, and recognize it. I can recognize these behaviors now. So as bad as I feel about who I was, I feel really good about who I am. And I have this bonus Spidey skill, I guess you could call it. But when I read your comments here, there's something happening here that happens with emotionally abusive people, is that they will often place the blame of what they're doing on you. And even worse than that, they'll actually accuse you of what they're doing. And so this is what I mean when I put myself in the position I used to be in. I'm able to see that pattern in other people. It's very similar to what he's doing. I'm going to guess that he is capable, or has and is, I hate to say this, cheating, because he's so easily accusing you of it. And I only say that because of all the dots that I'm connecting with this letter. And one of those dots, it's actually going to come in a moment here because I read this earlier, but one of those dots is something I'm going to tell you in a moment. And another dot is that he doesn't let you check his phone. Somebody with nothing to hide doesn't care. They don't care. They'll hand it to you. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have a second phone. And I don't mean to make everyone suspicious, but this happens too, so you have to be careful of that. But someone who doesn't have anything to hide doesn't care. In fact, they will support that. They will say, absolutely, if you feel that way, I don't want you to feel suspicious of me, so I will let you check anything you need to check. In other words, I can open up my Messenger and Facebook and allow my girlfriend to see every single message I've ever sent to anyone because I have nothing to hide. There's nothing there that she would ever be suspicious of. And so it's easy for me to go, yeah, no problem. Here you go. Here's my login. She never would, I don't think. But if she did, I would have no problem doing it. If some jealous thought came in or suspicion came in, then my goal is to eradicate that suspicion as fast as possible, not by trying to convince her, but by allowing her to convince herself. And that's what needs to happen. So if he wants you to convince yourself, then he should allow you to do as much sleuthing as you possibly need to so that you feel confident in yourself. So I'm kind of irritated that he's allowed to check your phone, but you're not allowed to check his. This tells me that he's got something going on, or he's contemplating something, or he's just having inappropriate conversations with people he shouldn't have, and he's keeping you occupied by checking your phone and also making it look like he's the jealous one and he's concerned about you cheating when he is really being unrelationship-like. In other words, it sounds like he has something to hide. I'm not saying he does. I'm not saying that's what he's doing. But all these dots are starting to connect. And this is how my brain works, and this is how abusive behavior works too. You can't take one single behavior and call it emotional abuse. You can take a number of behaviors, connect the dots over a period of time, and then call that emotional abuse if all those dots create a picture of it. And that's what it's creating here. So this is sort of an analysis of all these dots that you're giving me. And this is where I'm helping you go inside your head so that you don't look at one behavior and go, well, maybe I'm overthinking that, or maybe I'm too sensitive there. No, you have to look at all of these behaviors as a whole and see that, oh, that one compounds this and compounds this. That one's a red flag, and that one's a red flag, and that one's a red flag. And all of these compound into an unhealthy pattern of behaviors. It's all about the patterns. And let me mention something about jealousy. You said you were working on jealousy and you worked on it and you were ready for your next relationship. Jealousy almost always stems from not being able to trust the other person. If you had 100% trust in him, you wouldn't be jealous. Jealousy is thinking that somebody's going to take that person away, or they're going to leave you for someone else, or you're not important enough or worthy enough. And if you trusted the other person 100%, they're going to reinforce all the good stuff about you. They're going to show you that they love you and they care about you, and they're going to show up in trusting ways. So he's not showing up in trusting ways, and it's lighting up your relationship radar like a Christmas tree. And whether you want to believe it or not, this is what's happening. All of these red flags are going off, so you can't trust him. And in my opinion, you cannot have a relationship without trust. If you don't trust, it's not a relationship. Trust is an integral part of the relationship. I don't want to speak for everyone here, but there are components of a relationship that must be present for me to feel like I'm in a relationship. And trust is like near the top. Trust has to be in there. And if that's not in there, it's not a relationship. So again, those are my values. I don't want to pour them onto you, but I think most people think that. And the next thing you said, I didn't read, but you said, I feel uncomfortable when people look at my phone. There's a boundary right there. There's something that should be checked in your unacceptable column. No one gets to look at my phone. You should just make that unacceptable. Sorry, that's my phone. I don't want people looking at it. This is my life, my phone, and you hold true to that. And if the person you're with doesn't value that, then, tough. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll always be that way, because right now you're in a space where you don't like people looking at your phone. But I guarantee you, if you were in a relationship that you felt 100% trusting and loving, and you felt supported and you felt cared for, you wouldn't give two hoots if they looked at your phone. I mean, that's my guess. I might be wrong. Maybe that's a real personal thing for you, and you don't ever want it to allow it to happen because you have that's your privacy, that's your personal space, and that's fine too. So again, put it in the unacceptable column. But most relationships, when they are trusting and loving and caring and supportive, it's not going to matter. Hey, honey, can you grab my phone? Hey, honey, can you tell me what Joe said in the text? Hey, whatever. There's that freedom to feel safe with the person you're with. So again, you don't have to go in that direction, but I would definitely make it unacceptable now so that you can start building this structure inside of you. And what I mean by that is a solid foundation of what you will and won't accept so that you can start building trust in yourself. And that's important. Self-trust is important too. Trust is important in relationships. Self-trust is probably more important. You need to trust yourself. You need to move into that space where you can make decisions with confidence and surety. Doesn't mean you'll always be right. It just means you have faith that you're doing the best you can, that your decisions are based on the best available data, and you get that data by asking yourself the question, how do I know this is true? And so you have this solid framework to work inside of you, so as you move forward, you get to understand yourself better and again, trust yourself more. So let me finish reading this. You go on to say, is it true that all narcissists cheat? Well, let me answer that question really quick. No. I'm going to say no, not all narcissists cheat, but I will say that a true narcissist without empathy won't care how you feel if they cheat. So I'm going to put that out there, knowing that there are other components to that make that true or not. Like, for example, it may be 100% true that someone without empathy does something bad, lies, cheats, steals, and doesn't care how you feel, but does care about accountability, so they won't do it. So there's that. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to lose the person in their life. Even though you hope it's an emotional attachment, it could be a self-preservation thing too. That's a deeper subject maybe we'll talk about on another day. But no, I don't believe that all narcissists cheat. I believe that we all have the capacity to cheat. It's just that someone without empathy is not going to care. They're not going to consider your emotions when they are attracted to someone else and they go have an affair. That just won't be in their line of thinking. And I'm going to say this, it may not even be because they don't care about you. They actually might. But it's just that they don't care how you feel about what they do because it's about them. Their life is about them. What they do is about them. Everything they do is about them and how it serves them. So cheating may or may not be on the menu for every narcissist, but you do have to be aware that if someone doesn't care about you because they aren't capable of empathy, you're just not sure what to expect, which is why it can be scary to have a relationship with a narcissist. Because if they don't care how you feel, that means they can do pretty much anything they want. So I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here. I'm not saying that narcissism equals evil person. I'm saying that you just have to be careful around people that don't have empathy. I think I'll just leave it there. You go on to say, he lied to me about drinking, gambling, and doing drugs, and he was so sorry that he lied to me and he wanted to get help, which is what he did. He did speak to someone, but it wasn't enough because he stopped his sessions. Okay, I don't really have to say too much there. I mean, you've kind of wrapped everything up in a nice bow here. I mean, what you're saying is that he has lied about drinking and gambling and drugs, and he's gone to therapy, but he stopped that. So what I'm seeing is more of the pattern, more of those dots to connect, more red flags, and those are big ones. The lies and the actions are big ones. And so those are all part of the pattern that you have to put together and say, this is who he'll always be. Let's move on. I want to be happy and feel loved and supported, and I hope things will change. He is so used to me running back to him because he's so good with his words. So I think I need to stop talking to him, but I'm scared. Any advice on how to move away from a toxic relationship? And she has another question. Do you know what might be running through his head with no communication? Oh, because he's giving me the silent treatment. Thank you for your help, Paul. Honestly, you're getting me through a really rough time and you've motivated me to help others too. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And I'm being a little tough on you. There's some stuff I'm telling you that just sounds like this is what you need to do. But I do say this out of love and respect for you. And I want you to be able to have a clarity of mind as you move forward. Like your question on any advice on how to move away from a toxic relationship, that has to come from within first. And what I mean by that is if you have trepidations about your relationship, if you're thinking, should I leave? Should I stay? If that's still in there, then asking someone else, should I leave? Should I stay? Is not going to work because it has to become clear in your mind. Now, what I do, you didn't necessarily ask, should I leave? Should I stay? You said, how do I move away from a toxic relationship? Everything I've shared in this episode so far has been how to move away from a toxic relationship. But really, it's not necessarily moving away from a toxic relationship. You have to get that line of thinking out of your head. And let me tell you why. It's because of your focus. When you focus on moving away from a toxic relationship, that means you can spend a week at your friend's house or your mom's house, and you'll be away from that toxic relationship. So moving away from the toxic relationship isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is getting sucked back into one or having the mindset where you think you need that toxic person in your life. So what I like to do is instead of moving away from the toxic relationship, I like to focus on how do I heal myself. And what that means is when you focus on yourself and what you need to do to heal, anything toxic you won't allow into your system. And a good analogy with that is, let's just say that you've been a vegetarian for a year and suddenly somebody gives you a hamburger. That would probably be toxic to you. At least your perception would be, hey, this meat's going to be toxic to my system. I can't just eat a hamburger after being a vegetarian for a year. So I'm not going to allow this hamburger into my system. This is because you've worked on yourself. You've done the best you can. You've stayed disciplined. You've stayed on the course, and you have continued practicing a lifestyle that doesn't allow meat. And so when somebody introduces meat, you are clear. You have that clarity of mind, and it's easy for you to come to the conclusion that you will not allow that into your system. This is what I mean. When you work on yourself, you won't allow toxic behavior into your system. And that begins with your boundaries. What's acceptable, what's not. And it grows into the trust you have in yourself because you are enforcing those boundaries. You are providing accountability. You are focusing on what you need to do for you, not what you need to do for the relationship, not what you need to do for the other person, what you need to do for you. And you can look at all the people in your life that might cross your boundaries and ask yourself, well, why am I letting those people cross my boundaries? Or if you can't answer that question, you tell yourself, look, from this point forward, I'm not going to let those people cross my boundaries. So this can happen in all aspects of your life, or it should happen in all aspects, or at least most aspects of your life, where you start honoring yourself to the point where it's okay to tell people what you want and what you don't want. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say yes. It's okay to say anything that you feel that you need to do for yourself because you are allowed to, because you're important, because you matter, because you are worthy and you are lovable. And anyone who doesn't find you worthy and lovable, you don't have time for. You don't have time to deal with those kind of people. You don't have time to deal with people that don't respect you because you respect yourself. This is why it all starts with you. How do I love myself? How do I show myself that I am worthy? How do I feel important? This is all stuff you have to work on. Because if you feel all of these things, then when a toxic element or a toxic person comes into your life and you've been working on yourself for 6 months, a year, 5 years, then it's going to be so easy to go, I like who I am right now. I love myself. I'm not going to let this toxic element ruin what I got going on right now because this is pretty darn good. Just like the person who loves being a vegetarian who looks at that hamburger and says, no way, I've gotten this far and I'm not going to stop now. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not going to allow that into my system. This is why it's important to work on yourself. So I think I answered most of your questions. Thank you so much for sharing this. I know you're going through some challenging times. Your final question I didn't really answer. Do you know what might be running through his head with no communication and the silent treatment? For me, that was a control mechanism. I don't have much good news for you. All of these behaviors are a way to control you, to make you feel bad, to make you feel guilty, because you're compassionate, you're sympathetic, you're empathetic, you're caring. And caring people, when they think they're hurting someone, will try harder to meet that person's needs. And so you need to be aware of this in yourself. When someone does the silent treatment on you, and you're this caring, kind, compassionate person, it's often a way to control you, because if you feel bad enough, if you feel guilty enough, you're going to submit. And submission comes in the form of trying to please the other person, trying harder, doing more. And the more you do, the more control they have over you. So just be aware of all these behaviors inside of you so they don't fall for some of this stuff. And I don't really mean to call you naive. I don't really mean to call you gullible, if that's what it sounds like I'm saying. I'm telling you this to empower you so that any innocent gullibility or naivete or vulnerability that you have can be monitored in a different way so that you don't get taken advantage of. Because there are some people in this world that know how to take advantage of vulnerable people. And it would be wonderful if this was utopia and we were all vulnerable and we were all caring and kind and compassionate, but not all of us are. Some people take advantage of that. And yes, they may have had troubled childhoods. They may have had trauma that they're dealing with and they have to deal with. And when they're hurting you, yes, they may be a victim themselves, and you can be compassionate toward them, but make sure you're giving yourself enough compassion so that you don't become their victim as well. Because if they really are a victim, they shouldn't lay that on you. They should take care of themselves. They need help. If they really feel that they are a victim to life or trauma or abuse, which may all be true, they need to take care of themselves. They need to get help because you're not their therapist. And if you really are a therapist and they're your client, that's a different story. But if you're involved with them in any emotional way, or you're connected to them in some way through family or relationships, you really need to separate yourself from that, because once you're personally involved, you're already compromised in a way. Because some people have the ability to take advantage of that because of the emotional connection that you may have. Thank you so much for writing that. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Meaning Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships containing a 200-point checklist to help you not only pinpoint the exact behaviors causing the difficulties in your relationship, but also clearly reveal to you why you leave so many interactions feeling bad. The workbook will help you make the next best relationship decisions for both of you. Use it to understand your own behaviors and how they affect those you love, or use it together to reveal issues that you both need to work on. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk to you again soon.